Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm chatting with filmmaker and writer Paul Mercier about his film within a film, Prospect House. Prospect House screens at the Cork International Film Festival on Friday the 17th of November. So thank you so much for chatting with us. Prospect House is really fresh and funny and full of heart and dark and interesting. The characters are really well rounded. The pacing is really quick. Just tell me a little bit about how the idea came about.
Well, it started really with Anne Gately, who's the producer of the film, and Anne always had this story about a kidnap in an 18th century house, and it was something that she had thought about for many years and spoke about, and in a way that kind of triggered a number of ideas. But in the end, this is the one that we came up with, and was the one that I was kind of very keen to make, but based on Anne's original story. So, I mean, I wanted to say something about now. It's a very general word, but it's things like heritage and history and sense of place, and what it is that kind of shapes us where we live, and our understanding of a place and our understanding of the stories of that particular place. But it's also more than that. It's also about history and how we tell the stories from our history, and the way everything just all get mixed up. And I mean, and also in this day and age, the way we do documentaries about history as well, and the way we kind of pick and choose what it is we want to tell and what we want to say. And in a way, you create your own version of the truth. You create, or you perpetuate a certain mythology. You have to ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to entertain the people who are listening to or watching what you're doing. And you mix all that together in the one big pot, and then suddenly you end up with something that you have to question: is it really very, very, how truthful is it? But in another way, it also has its own truth. I mean, I'm not a documentary maker, nor do I in any way pretend to be a historian or anything like that. I love history, absolutely, always did love history. I love delving into the past and trying to figure out, how things happened and so forth. But at the same time, I'm also involved in the process of fiction making and making up stories. And I have in the past done plays, for example, that have dealt with history in a certain way, or dealt with what we call, there's two words. One is history, and the other one is backstory. And of course, I'm always fascinated about what it is that people understand about the backstory. And I'm also interested in things like memory. So if you combine those together, you deal with them when you're writing a fiction. But it's also interesting when you're writing what you might call historical fiction as well. And what exactly is that? And then you have fiction that is based on history and so forth. So in a way, all of that came into play. I just found that suddenly there was this kind of, how would you describe it? That suddenly all of these things you could in some way deal with or treat in this story that was in Anne's mind for so long. So we decided, well, look, this is the route we're going to take. We're going to work with this. We're going to get ourselves a house, and we're going to put together an ensemble of actors, and we're going to create this story. And that's exactly that. That's what happened, really.
And talk to me about your collaboration with Anne. So she comes up with an idea. Do you guys sit down and workshop it? Do you go and take it and bring it back? Is there a back and forth, a reading of scripts at certain points, or is it very much so plotted out before it like, what does that process look like?
Well, it depends on the project. I mean, we've worked on it on other projects in the past, and we've done those differently. Like this would be the third film that we've worked on together. But I suppose, yeah, I mean, I would say that Anne might be closer to this one in terms of our own experience than the others. But really the process was a case of saying, look, let's go and write the story, and then let's see how best we can develop it to tell the story ultimately that we're going to tell. I mean, the story we set out to tell, yeah, we kind of knew what we were going to do, but what you end up with, like, in film, what you end up with it can go on a journey, it can go slightly on a trajectory, but I do think it's still dealing with the themes that we set out to create. And of course, Anne as well is a designer in her own right, so she would have had a huge input into the project as well in that front. So there was a point then when it was just really a case of, right, well, I'll get on with the writing now and get on with the casting and get on with the directing of it. And Anne had her own job, which is to get on with the producing of it and get on with the designing of it, basically. You know what I mean? In fact, that's the most important job, because if she can't raise the funding or create the circumstances in which we can make the film, well, then sure, we wouldn't be making it at all,
Of course.
So really, that would be the biggest conversation of all, But also the ambition as well is just that we did it on a very small budget, and it was a very ambitious project, Gemma, for such a small budget. So we had to kind of take a lot of things into account, and there were a lot of considerations along the way there,
I saw the amount of people in it, and I thought, oh my God, the blocking and editing of that is going to be so hard. Like, there's so much action to even have it, like there's so much that needs to be hit. There's so much technicality elements of it. There's effects. There's like period pieces. Like some of it looks like it's quite cold. There's like the welfare of people. There's violence in it. I'm like, all that is very technical and time consuming as well to shoot. So tell me a little bit about what it was like. Okay, so I'll actually go back to the project stage and go, when you're looking to get funding, were you looking for bigger funding? Because it is it's a big story. Or were you, say, aiming for that level? Or did you have to readjust what you were doing after, people came on board?
Yeah, very good question. Of course, it always raises the first question is, if you had more money, would you have made what kind of a film would you have made? You know what I mean? It's the big question we always ask ourselves. If somebody threw a few million at you there, would you have told a different story?
Or just told it bigger?
Would it have been bigger? Yeah. Would there be more people? Yeah, in a way, I'd say, yeah. What would you have done? A good question. I think we probably would have been, you see, in a way we had to, I mean, something as basic as the amount of time that we had to shoot. We shot it in 4 weeks as such at the outset, but we still had another week or two to do, about another 2 weeks that took a good over a year to do. And if we had more money, obviously we would have shot it all in one go in the time period that we had, and would have been able to.
And was that pickups, or was that, say, the period pieces? Like, what was the separate shooting?
Well, I tell you what it was actually. It was the reality at the time, which was the tail end of the COVID-19 Omicron virus spread at the time. We started shooting just as that was hitting that was spreading. So in a way, we had to take a decision, which was, okay, we better make sure that by the end of our principal shoot, we have the spine of our story enough. We have the core story with the principal main cast, who were not going to be available after that as such, or for that matter, other aspects of the film, not least maybe the venue and so forth. But what we felt was, well, the thing is, we didn't know from one day to the next whether we were going to be shut down. So, you wake up on a day, you just hope that everybody's okay, and everybody was okay. Nobody got sick. Nothing like that ever happened. We were very fortunate. It was well managed, but it was still a risk. And therefore, if that happened, we could have been faced with, we didn't know what we would have. So we just concentrated on making sure that we had the main story, so that by the end of that intensive period, we could at least then go and edit. We could begin edit and then decide what it is we needed to do after that. you know. So in a way, I wouldn't so much call them pickups. I would call it the follow up. They were the follow up processes. In other words, we it was very unconventional, but the whole situation was just bizarre anyway. So really, what we said was, okay, what could we conceivably work on at a later date and put all our energies into what we need to do now to save the project, and that's exactly what happened.
And because it's intense, and again I was just looking at all that blocking and all that action scene, because it's just consistent, it's just a sort of onslaught of movement and pacing and trafficking. I just the technicalities of that, cutting it, did it present many problems, or did you know you were always going to go back and do that second block so you could take liberties and say, look, we'll get a cutaway for this? Or
Yeah, there were different the different parts of the film had different challenges, yes. But we were fortunate by the end of the principal shoot that we could put together the film to know what it is that was missing. You know, you don't know what's missing until you actually get into the first stage of the edit. And Eamon Cleary, who edited the film, he was great. He was great. He was able to assemble it in such a way that we could say, okay, we knew what we knew then what it was that we needed to do, but we also knew what it was that we could afford to do as well, or could not afford to do, and decisions get made along the way. But I mean, there was another layer of narrative that had to go into the film as well, but that could be done without it depending on a huge cast as well throughout the whole film. So it was challenging, I have to say. It was very, very challenging because, I mean, not least because, in terms of location, but also in terms of season. I mean, we were going in and out of season as well. And, but they were a great cast and crew, great ensemble, and they gave it their all. They really did. And they were very, very supportive. And so we were delighted. We were lucky.
And it's strong. It's very strong writing, and it's very layered. I'm just very curious. So you, as a writer, as a director, there's not one thing you do. You do everything. You do kids programs, Irish language, English language, plays, comedy, darker projects, gritty crime, which I was like, for this. And this is something that I as a viewer would even struggle to classify. I was like, what would you define this? And what, say, when you were kind of coming into this, maybe looking for funding, maybe in your own mind as a director, kind of chatting with DOPs, what would your comps have been for this? Like, what would it have been like?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Hard to know. I mean, in a way, we're kind of, I don't know, Gemma, how you would kind of classify it. I mean, I would call it a satire as such. Yeah. I mean, what kind of a satire is it? Is comic satire, or what is it? Or it's satirical, but it's not. But at the same time, I didn't
very
want it
dark.
to say,
like there's dark themes in it as well, where I think that element of rewriting history and the role of women and how they were perceived, and that, like, the subtext of the trauma, it's like, but I do think things like that sit well within humor, because it makes it much more interesting to explore themes like that.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. The tone of it's interesting, actually. Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, at the same time, I didn't set out deliberately to say that it was, look, you're going to watch a satire, which means you're going to have a laugh or two, and it's going to be, going to challenge. It's almost like I didn't want people to know it was a satire until they watched it. It was almost like I didn't want to announce that it was going to be a satire.
But it's a very earnest satire as well, in
Yes.
ways, because
that people will come out and say, hold on, was that a I don't but anyway, that doesn't change in terms of categorization or genre, but you see, in a way, it's how would you say, it's looking at all of those genres as well within itself. You know what I mean? And they're trying to ask themselves what kind of a genre it is that they're making. But like I say, it's a mix of a modern day documentary and modern day historical drama. Do you know what I mean? Like, as we tell them.
Yeah, yeah.
I just you know, I always have a thing about historical drama when I watch it. I mean, you kind of ask yourself, to what extent is any of this going to be, apart from the costumes and the setting and the so forth. I mean, I find them fascinating, but how true are they? You know what I mean? It's always a question I have in my head. How true, particularly when it's set in another country and everybody's speaking English. I love those ones. I love those historical dramas when all the denizens and the court of Versailles are all speaking perfect English and things like that. It's just, and yet the detail, the execution, the research is just, it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's like watching Napoleon that's going to come up. I mean, I can't wait to see something like that. It's just the scale of the epic, of the historical epic. But then you're asking, I just find myself asking questions all the time. Not a judgment on it as a piece of filmmaking as such. It's not that. It's just that at what point is the story purely for the sake of telling the story as a cinematic exercise, rather than actually giving us an understanding of history, an understanding of people and character and the reasons why things were done, you know?
Yeah.
Just find that very interesting.
It is, but I mean, I would be of the opinion that there is never any truth, that everything is so subjective. I mean, you can get as close to the truth as possible, but is it not the emotional truth is more important, because everything is so subjective anyway? And actually, you touched on something very interesting there, and it was about language. So obviously language is important in your work. In Tupperware, you had like a bunch of them, tourists and Irish language speakers. How does that influence your work and your writing? You know, like working in a different language, essentially, like, you know, going from writing in Irish to English. Do you feel like it changes the way that you would look at the subject matter or characters?
Yeah. What I would say is that even though I've worked in the Irish language, and I've worked with people, other actors in the Irish language, and created work that way, I'm not an Irish language writer. You know, I mean, I can work in Irish, and I can make work in the Irish language, no problem. But I'm actually not an Irish language writer. And when I say that, Gemma, what I mean is I'm not actually expressing myself through the medium of Irish, because that is my language as such. That's the way I think or feel. But that's separate from having an emotional attachment to the Irish language as such.
Yeah.
Or having a feeling that the language, that to in some way enable the language to do things, and like in the case of Africa, the ambition, sole ambition there was to create a teenage drama that could stand on its own 2 feet in the Irish language, and in some way entertain and reach out to a generation of people in the Irish language. And for me, that's enough. And I can work with the language in that particular way. But I do think that that's very, very important. But then it's different from somebody from maybe from the Gaeltacht area whose language it is, and who expresses themselves in that language. That's a different thing entirely. So it's not that I have so therefore, if I'm writing in English, well, I'm writing in the language that I was born with. You know what I mean? So that's what I think, how I think, and so forth. So it would be a different experience, and I would I've you know, it depends on the play, really. It depends on the characters, and in this case, it really is about trying to find a a way of getting the language to both tell the story that is going to be told, while at the same time dealing with all the personal relationships and all the dynamic that is going on at the same time. So it was a tricky project, all right. Tricky one to do.
And what's very interesting, actually, when you touched on Afric and your other work, and then even I didn't realize Studs was you until I went researching for this. I saw that many years ago when I worked in Extravision, that you just span all the genres and really get into them and do things that are so akin to them and speak in different languages in terms of the language of cinema when it comes to, say, a gangster film versus comedy is so different. Like, it's such a different format, it's such a different pacing, it's different character development. Just how do you, like, first of all, why do you feel you do that as a writer and director? Is it just these are the themes that consume you and this is the form they come in? Is it just that's what the, like, what's the, how do you jump from
why do I do it?
Like, it's so satisfying. Yeah.
That's what I think. Yeah. I suppose, I mean, like, an idea can take hold and you start working on it, and before you know it, it gets to a point where you can, I mean, look, I mean, the thing is, if you it's always important to know why you're doing it, and there's always a reason to want to tell the story and to keep that alive, because at the end of the day, then if you lose that, it can be very, very difficult. So I always have to be emotionally involved in it, and that can sometimes, and that in a way really can influence the way you write and the actual type of writing that you do for it. But also as well, Gemma, I mean, sometimes there's this kind of, I mean, my original experience is in theatre, and so when you're writing for the stage, it's a different experience than writing for the film, and I found that out when I started doing film.
How do you perceive that? What would be the main differences you would see?
I suppose the obvious one is that, film, you should show with the visuals rather than telling us you know what I mean. In theater, it's the same idea. If there's a battle going on, it's going on off stage, so you describe the battle, as Shakespeare did so well. You just describe the battle. You ideally don't bring the battle on stage, and it's much more effective. And in a way, theatre, that's the power of theatre. It tunes, it works on the audience's imagination, and gets the audience. So in other words, I mean, what is, I still find this fascinating, that in a theatre you could have 100 people in the theatre and somebody's telling a story about what happened off stage, and each one of those people in that audience has a different picture of what actually happened off that stage. And I mean, I talk about a visual picture in their imagination, you know what I mean? Whereas in film, the 100 people are seeing what you're showing them on the screen, which to some extent, okay, now that's not just, I mean, that's a very kind of very crude way of putting it, but you're mindful of the fact that when you show something, it's different from when you suggest something on stage. And of course, you suggest things on stage with language, or you take your audience on a journey on stage through the use of language. Yes, there is visual, there is performance, there is the visual journey and so forth, but essentially it's about using language, for me anyway.
So it's the budgetary constraints then that exist in film, and the physical constraints of having to present it in a visually truthful way is a bit more restrictive.
Yeah, it can be, but you have to look. I mean, again, it comes back to your question about, look, if you had all the money in the world, what kind of a film would you end up making? You know what I mean? and the chances are you'd make a disaster. It could be a disaster, or it could be far from what it is you actually. It could be far from what it is you actually originally set out to make. In other words, sometimes it could be. Now, I'm just saying it could be. Sometimes saying it less is best, or having to confine or limit limit your space or limit what it is you can do. But then it has to be an artistic choice. You have to say to yourself, okay, I'm just going to limit my story to a particular location, and I'm not going outside that location. Okay, but if you had all the money in the world, would you go outside that location? And so you have to answer that question. You said, no, I wouldn't. Why? Because my story benefits, or the visual experience benefits from the fact that you don't go anywhere else and you stay where you are, because maybe claustrophobia is what it is that you want to create, or a sense of entrapment, or a sense of limitation, or a sense of place, a sense of location, and so film does raise all of those questions as well. It's just that in theatre, the stage is all you have, and you have limitations there too, and you have to make decisions about, is less best. Are you going to go the Beckettian route and just have nothing on stage whatsoever? Are you going to go in a more kind of operatic mode and just give it the full welly? You know what I mean? Which is best for the story you want to tell? But ultimately, at the end of the day, what is best to enable the audience to go on the journey with you, and the more you can do to enable that, the better. And sometimes the less you show, the better, so that and trust your audience, because to go on that journey with you, as long as they say, you give the audience the information, or the visual information, to allow them to go on that particular journey. So, I mean, it really depends on the project. But having had the experience of theatre, really does, I feel in my case, help to examine or to interrogate that as you go along, But it's not a case that I've just come to it like some other artists will have just done nothing else but film, and I find it fascinating talking to them, particularly editors and people like that, who have no experience of theatre at all, and they just look at it purely as the vocabulary of the visual. It's really, that's what it is, or the language of the visual. What are you saying here? And you could be in an editing room and they'd say something to you, and they would question why that is there in the first place. Or do you? And to be honest, what editors do quite well, more than anybody else, is it really necessary?
Yeah.
Do you need that? I find that fascinating.
Yeah, actually, the picture tells 1,000 words. Sometimes the non-visual communication is 10 times more powerful than the dialogue when you see it on that screen. Like those wordless shorts are the ones with minimal wording. Sometimes they can just really,
I mean, they're fascinating,
universally speak to the soul. I do find one of the things the Prospect House does very interesting, and I'm just wondering how much of this is borrowed from truth, is sort of take a playful look at the building of art, like it's that meta, a film within a film, a story within a mockumentary, a story within a film within a mockumentary, and we're watching these collaborative creatives kind of work together under these high pressure kind of situations to work out their own arcs and then to create something as a whole. And I'm just wondering, when it comes to those dynamics, the power dynamics, the personal dynamics, is that sort of borrowed from truth? Like, do you, when you're creating characters like these and the processes that they're going through, do you kind of like cherry pick little bits of facts? Are they completely fictionalized, or is there, kind of subtle bits of yourself through them?
Yeah, that's your question, isn't it? Are we writing about ourselves?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
want the
you put
dirt.
it. Yeah, yeah, you put it very well there, Gemma. Yeah, I suppose we do. I mean, we we all write from experience. Yeah, um, yeah. In a way, and also, I mean, that sort of the nature of those relationships, or the dynamic that you have when you're creating something. You know, particularly when you're putting a story together. I mean, in this case, they really don't know what story they're telling as such. Um, and of course, it raises another thing, which is that is different quite often in film. That I found is that when you're doing a play, or particularly when we were doing work with the Passion Machine Theatre Company and any other work for that matter for the stage, you're working with actors, an ensemble of actors and crew over a period of time. That could be anything from 4 weeks to 5 weeks or whatever. Okay. And the process of creating your story, well, I mean, maybe the process that I like is to be able to actually do it with the actors, work it through, and the story evolves. Well, not so much the story, but the script evolves. But there's a sense of ownership from the cast and the ensemble, a great sense of ownership from it. They're getting it under their skin over a period of time, so that when you get to the maybe the first night of the performance, or your dress rehearsal, or whatever, you're down to shorthand, and then all you have to do is just mention, you mumble, you grunt a line, and they know exactly where you are. They know what you're talking about. They know every aspect of it. So it's a communal thing, it's a collective thing, it's an ensemble thing. And what threw me when I started making film was there's none of that. There's none of that, because you can't afford it, and that's where the extra million would go. For me, is to be able to spend 6 months or 6 weeks or 4 weeks with the cast before you even go shooting. That would be absolutely magic. But the reality is that what you have is a very limited amount of time, partly to do with the fact that it's the people's availability is limited too, but you partly to do with the fact that you're working on a location. And what happens is that the one extreme is that you could have an actor turning up on the day, and really that you've got to explain exactly what's going on. That has happened, what's going on, and then shoot it. And the actor has no involvement whatsoever in how that gets edited, where all that is going. And you have to kind of explain that, so that they kind of know what it is that they're working to. They don't know. I'm sure there have been situations where an actor does not know what's happening before that, or did somebody say something about them, or are they who they're talking about? They probably don't even see the other person that they're talking about.
And I would say, in their defense, this is a very complex narrative, where sometimes you'd be like, oh yeah, that's indefensible showing up if they have the whole script, but actually in this it's deeply complex and so nuanced. You can totally picture them going, actually, what's the inference of this?
Yeah, that's bizarre, and so I find that I mean that it's challenging. It is challenging, but all I'm saying is it's the difference between the two, and what you have to do, you have to be very careful that you don't you don't start relying on what is your theatrical instinct or your theatrical experience in creating something in film, because film can be merciless in such a way that really, sorry, you've got half an hour to do this, and that's the end of it, and your light is failing, and good luck to you, and that's it. You can't come back the next day, as you might do in theatre. Come back the next day. Can we rethink this? So it's fascinating that way, and so it's, in a way, I wanted to, some way, kind of capture that, capture elements of that in the story of these people who are trying to put their own version of events together for their own project.
And okay, so with Prospect House as well, because it's so different from your other films, can you tell me a little bit about what the lessons were that were learned on this one?
Uh, well, the big one of the big lessons is to make sure. I mean, what we wanted to do was we wanted to provide a lot of experience for people who would not have normally had that experience. Um, and so therefore there's a lot of new talent in the project, working in the project. Um, what I would have what I would do in future if we were going to do something like that is I was trying to make sure that we could give more time to workshop in advance. Not that people weren't good enough or anything. No, no, nothing of the kind at all. It's to be able to. What I found was that I underestimated how people who were coming new to the process really needed time to understand how the process worked.
Yeah.
So, in other words, if a young person who wanted to do a particular type of field of work in film, rather it would have been great if we had more time to be able to say to spend time with them to give them an idea of what to expect so that they could learn quicker and participate even in a richer and a more deeper and in a deeper way. So that's one thing I would love to do. God, a good question. I mean, I'm not even at that stage now, Gemma, where I could look back because we've only just finished it.
Yeah.
And but yeah, get more money.
I know that's always I don't think anyone is like, that's enough money. God, this low budget film was just so easy to shoot on this amount because it's such an expensive process. Um, was this because did you feel like this was a more complicated project to shoot than your other films as well, given the nature of how filming and COVID and the group scenes, or is it just different in different ways?
It was just different, really. It was very, very different challenges, I have to say. Yeah, but no, I mean, it worked. There was a great bunch of people, and yeah. It's always different. It's always different. It depends on the project. It depends on the location. It depends on the circumstances. Obviously, we had the added factor of Omicron and COVID in the background looming in there. So you had to work. You had to work in a different way. You had to, different process. Had to take all that into account. But yeah, I mean, I find that every project is just a different challenge, really. I mean, I love the challenge, and I love doing it. But and we always learn. But like I say, I don't exactly know what I've learned from this one yet.
It takes a while to process. Therapy helps. The tell me about what's next now on the cards. I normally don't ask that because it's about this project, but I'm just so interested in your trajectory and all the different roles all the different types of projects that you've taken on. I'm just wondering, after this, do you maybe go in a completely different direction? Is there something that you had on the back burner that you're taking out? How do you decide what your next one will be?
Well, you're sometimes those decisions can be made for you. I mean, it does depend on how you're going to be funded. I mean, we do have a number of projects we would like to make. Yes, myself and Anne have about 3 projects we want to make, and we're working on them all the time. I mean, it's not that the process of creating the work is also very, very important. But what project we actually go with next is really going to be determined by what funding is available for that particular project. And the circumstances in which it happens. So, I mean, we do have other projects, Gemma. Yeah, I'm not at liberty to say right now what those are. I mean, but they will be very, very different from what we've just made. I tell you that much.
Like, do you kind of feel as a writer thematically you're just drawn in different ways at different points, and if you've kind of completed one project that's so based heavily in this one area, are you kind of leaning to, you know, have a bit of a, what's that when they plant different crops in different fields at different
Oh
years?
yes,
You know, like
yeah,
leave the field grow fallow and work on something
yes,
totally
the
different. So that,
rotation, like the rotation process with the potatoes, like yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, in a way, yeah. I mean, I find that sometimes projects can grow, they can mature. Sometimes um, you can put them away and find that you when you come back to them that you might have a different perspective, or you might approach the subject matter differently. I mean, that in a way is what kind of happened with Prospect House. It kind of grew over time. I also feel that it was finding you can get locked into a way of telling a story as well. You can get locked into what you think your story is about. And sometimes when you get away from it, you can say, no, there's something else going on here. Or you just might have the confidence to pursue a particular angle with the story. And so, I mean, over time, you kind of you do give the projects time to filter to some extent, but also to develop. And but whether you make a decision, I don't think it's a case, Gemma, that you'd make a decision. I'm never going to go near that subject, that type of theme or that type of genre ever again. It's never really about that. It's more to do with what the film is about. It's essentially what the film is about. And if in a way we'd like to do a story set in the west of Ireland, for example, which is one of the projects that we have, about a coming of age story, that's what the story is about. It's about children coming of age, and we're very passionate about that. But we're also passionate about the fact that the story is set in a particular region, and we're also passionate about the fact that it's about a particular experience, and also it may be becoming a metaphor, or in some way being a universal story that can speak for all children and families anywhere, anytime, any place, anywhere. So really, that's essentially what it is. So what happens then after that is how you go about telling that story is going to be determined by, number one, how much money you have. Yes.
Cine car.
And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then you say, this is what you have now. Now bring everything to bear on the circumstances and the way you're going to tell it, and this is what it's going to be, and you work with that. You know what I mean? So yeah. So, but it's not that we're kind of saying no, we don't want to go there again or anything like that. No.
Yeah, but I mean, it's such an interesting process. And again, it's more so if something is too dark or too heavy, do you have to, you know, or like, are you instinctively drawn to take something lighter more so specifically, especially when at the moment there's a weightiness to everything, you know, like do those things impact on your psyche, and then does that influence the writing sort of? That, I think that was what I was trying to ask, but you kind of answered it. Yeah.
Well, actually, you know, you're right there, Gemma. Yeah, there is that. And there's also the fact that there is an industry out there as well that's kind of to some way intimating or communicating to you that what it is that they think the audience wants, or what's in vogue, or what appeals to an audience. That's a tricky affair, because in a way that's all tied up with the funding as well. And there's also the other thing which I find interesting is the idea that sometimes you're kind of aware of the fact that it has the story already been told, or you might be told that that's already been done, or and in a way you're kind of navigating that as well, you know. I mean, look, sometimes it's not so much the story you tell, it's how you tell it and why you tell it. And we're just dealing with that dynamic all of the time, you know.
But you were saying earlier that you bring yourself to every project that you do, that there's part of you in it and your perspective, and I suppose that's the thing that makes it different.
Oh yeah, it has to be. I would find it very, very difficult to do a project that I wasn't actually emotionally invested in it, or didn't want to, or if I'd have to feel that the project it has a good reason to be made for a start, but also I feel that it needs to be about something. It needs to say something. I really would feel that. Yeah, I would have great difficulty doing it otherwise. Maybe not. Maybe not. I mean, look, but what I would say is no. I mean, like that's very. To be honest with you, no matter what you do, you'd invest yourself in it. If you were going to do a good job anyway, you'd want to. You'd have to. I mean, otherwise, yeah, why bother?
Yeah.
Unless obviously it was just basically down to making a living, which is I mean, you have to take that into consideration as well.
I think I'd say, especially when it comes to writing specifically, it's not necessarily known to be the most lucrative of fields, even if you make money, unless you do the 50 Shades of Grey murder mystery. And even then it's saturated. Like it's not the money bit at all. I think that's what everyone has said to me at every point, where it's like, just, you'll never make a living at this, or if you do, it'll be from something else.
No, I mean, you never. Yeah, I mean, you can make a living, yeah. But if you're just doing it for the money, that's a different thing entirely. That's no.
But and are you looking forward now to watching this with audiences? Are you looking forward?
Yeah,
I
am, Gemma. I have to say, yeah, because it's only then that you kind of understand. That. I mean, that's what I was saying earlier on. I mean, the process, it's still, the journey isn't. We're still on the journey. We just don't know what way it communicates to an audience as such, or what way people take to it, because we're like that with it. Like, I mean, you're dealing with it. So, and it's a privilege. It's fantastic. It's wonderful to be able to play, to show something to people, and we're delighted to have this opportunity to do it for the Cork International Film Festival. It's great.
Great, yeah. And yeah, it is a great audience, and it's a great festival. So we'll put a link to the tickets in the description. So if anyone is looking to book their tickets, just click the link when it's attached below. But yeah, no, I'd say definitely one for the big screen, because it's so fast paced, so full of fabulous performances, nuance, layers, effects. I just think it's something that's so unique in tone and texture and place, but something that's so distinctive and really a joy to watch. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Gemma. Thank you that's very kind of you.